Welcome to the Basketball Zone Cowbell Kingdom YouTube channel. I'm your host, Leo Bias. Today we have a very special guest, my man, Tucker Daniel from the Sporting Logically YouTube channel. Awesome channel, guys. I came across one of his big videos, which was on Adrian Wojnarowski. You guys must check that out. I linked his YouTube channel in the description. And he also released a Carmelo Anthony trade video today. Super fascinating, my man. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Talk about yourself a little bit and, let my audience know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate you. Obviously, you guys having me on. Podcast is definitely something I want to get into in the future, whether it be my own or obviously appearing on others. So I appreciate it. Yeah. So like you're talking about, you found me through the video about Woj, and then I put out the Carmelo Anthony video today. And what I do is, as you said, the channel is called Sporting Logically. We're approaching 37,000 subscribers. It's been crazy since the season has started. And I actually started doing that full time in April. I was living in Atlanta after I graduated from NC State in 2017, had the opportunity to kind of cut back on some expenses and kind of pursue YouTube full time. And ever since April, I think we've gained nearly 30,000 subscribers in that time. So my big focus for the most part is some NBA history stuff, as well as trades, front office stuff, contract stuff. That's what interests me the most. And that's what I try and bring on an every other day schedule since the season has started. So every 2 days, I've got something else coming.
That's awesome. 37,000 subscribers.
Getting there. Yeah.
That's incredible, man. You also mentioned that you went to NC State, which
Correct,
I always joke about being the fake
Wolfpack,
not the real Wolfpack from Nevada. But you mentioned that you are familiar with the twins, the Martin twins.
Yeah.
Before we get into our topics, which are the Kings, the best teams in the East, and the best rookies, how do you feel about Nevada this year? Right now, we're currently ranked number 6 in the nation, which I never thought I'd see the day where my school would be ahead of Kentucky, North Carolina, UCLA, all these powerful programs. I mean, you give us a solid chance to make the Final Four this year.
I do. I mean, I love Muss. I think Muss does a great job. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe y'all have lost some fairly significant pieces. Cam Oliver potentially maybe isn't there anymore. I could be wrong.
The 2 years ago. So last year in their big run, did not have him. I think if they had him last year, they would have made the Final Four guaranteed. But they lost him the year before. I talked to him a lot actually, and he was split, right, from coming back to school or going to the draft. And it just happened that he entered in one of the strongest draft classes in 2017. So that was harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like you said, the Martin twins, I know one of them was either Conference Player of the Year or Co-Conference Player of the Year. Definitely better than what I saw at NC State. There was a lot of fanfare around them coming to NC State. And just that Godfrey era just didn't really click for them. And so I respected their decision to leave. And obviously they've been great for you guys. They definitely play well off each other. One of them much more of a facilitator, the other much more of a scorer shooter. So I would say Final Four is a realistic possibility. But I'm a big college basketball guy as well. I've been watching Duke, obviously a good amount, tons of ACC basketball for me. So I know a lot about your guy, Marvin Bagley. Watched him a lot last year. So definitely excited for it because it kind of felt like the season started and then it kind of tailed off because we had those big opening night games. But no, Nevada, I definitely think Final Four potential, which, even just that is exciting enough, So
you just mentioned Marvin Bagley.
Correct. Yeah.
You know what? Let's just get straight to the rookies. We're going the opposite today. I'm going to talk about this. You watched him play a lot at Duke.
I did.
I had him as my number 7 prospect on my big board. How did you feel about him coming into the draft, and then how has that changed right now, as you've watched him progress in his first 14 games?
So I took a lot of heat actually from people when I put out my mock draft, as well as just draft coverage in general, for not being as big on Bagley as other people. And for me specifically, the fact that I liked Wendell Carter Jr. better. And I just felt like because Bagley was and is so athletic, people thought Wendell Carter wasn't, and he thought he was slow, and that's not the case. And I think he's doing a great job with the Bulls as well. leading up the draft, I was Team Luka the whole time. I thought Luka was the best guy in the draft. I thought he should have been picked first. I liked DeAndre Ayton, but I just felt like in today's game, perimeter players are much more effective. And in terms of what you can get from a league average big guy compared to what DeAndre Ayton could be, I think there's a much bigger gap there between a league average wing and what Luka Doncic can be in terms of actual impact on the floor. For Bagley, the biggest thing was defensively. Like I felt like he was going to have to be one of two things. He was going to have to be a super skilled four that can shoot the ball, can attack the rim, can play off of other guys, or he was going to have to be a five that's going to be able to defend the rim, run the floor, use his athleticism. And the fact that Duke had to go zone so often and for the second half of the season, 100% of the time, made me very, very nervous for his defensive potential at the next level. I mean, skill-wise and athletically, there were times when I felt like he probably should have been playing on like an 11, 12-foot rim. Like it scared me sometimes, like how close he was to hitting his head on the backboard in the rim. But I can't remember the specific rankings, but I had him outside of the top 5 in terms of players on the board. I liked Jaren Jackson better. I liked Wendell Carter better, Luka, DeAndre Ayton, and then I couldn't remember my 5th guy. But I was kind of on the same page as you.
Yeah, so my top 5 was Luka Doncic number 1, Jaren Jackson number 2.
That was mine. Yep. Yep.
I think we're going to start doing our own podcast on there. Some fans got on me so much, but I'm like, I've studied these guys so much. And if you look at the analytics, like I always said, I have never seen a defensive specimen, a talented defender like a Jaren Jackson since an Anthony Davis. I said that alone right there garners his position at number 2, in my opinion, because every year from year 3 to year 15, barring injury, he's going to be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. And if you get any offense, that's extra. And as we've seen so far, it seems like Tom Izzo really kept him, kept his offensive abilities, and he has more than what we thought. He's really good in the paint, and he can stretch the floor. So, again, I know it's early, but at the same time, it upsets me that the Kings had the number 2 pick and brought in nobody to work out for them. We know Aiden was off limits, but at the same time, if you have number 2, you have to bring in Wendell Carter. They brought him in to pretty much ask him about Bagley. No disrespect, but you have to work him out. You have to work out Jaren, Miles, Mikal. So I had Luka, Jaren, Aiden, Miles at 4, Wendell at 5, Trey at 6, and Bagley at 7.
And that's another thing I'm hearing as well that we're on the same page with is I was not on the Mo Bamba hype train. I just wasn't. Like, and you can kind of see it now. There's one thing that he has two things that he has a ton of confidence in the NBA level, whether he should or shouldn't. The one that he should is rim protection. Definitely. He's a great shot blocker. The one that maybe he shouldn't have as much confidence in is his jump shot. And when you see him play, he's confident in shooting and he's confident protecting the rim. And obviously that combination at his size would, be great at this level, but I just wasn't fully sold on him. And the Trae Young thing, again, I can't remember where I put him, and we'll talk about him obviously in his start to the season. I couldn't figure him out, and I still can't figure him out because it's one of those things where second half of the year he struggled in some bigger games, but like 3 or 4 times a game he makes a play, he makes a shot, he makes a pass. It's like nobody else does that. This kid's 18, 19 years old. Nobody else in college makes that cross-court pass or makes that deep shot. And I had no idea what to think of him at the time. So definitely very much on the same page. And Jaren Jackson, my comp for him, despite the handedness being different, people like to compare righties to righties and lefties to lefties, was Chris Bosh. And especially with his ability to stretch the floor, guy that has a lot of switchability defensively, can switch in ball screens, can guard very well defensively. And I thought Memphis was a great spot. Like Marc Gasol's there. He's a guy that is not going to be thrust into the starting lineup initially, but is obviously eventually going to be part of the long-term plan. And I thought they did a great job getting him as well as Javon Carter, either late first or early second as well. So Memphis, I thought, did a great job. And yeah, it's funny that we had the exact same 2 and caught a similar amount of heat as well. Right.
And so before we continue talking about Marvin Bagley, I just heard, I think it was the most recent podcast with Woj. They had my guy on, Mike Schmitz, and Giovanni on from Dropped Express. And they talked about how not just the Kings, but many other teams had Luka at 6, 7, or 8. And they couldn't believe it. I could not. I was like, I almost crashed listening to that. I was listening to it in my car, and I was like, there is no way you can name 6 or 7 better players than Luka. Luka Doncic, to me, they transcendent offensive player, and we may never have a Luka again within the next 10 to 15 years. So when I hear things like that, it bugs me. And when I was talking to the front office from the Kings, they had Bagley supposedly number 1. I don't know if you caught that picture.
Yeah. No, the Vlad father. Yes. And
right. Exactly. I have yet to ask which Bridges it was, because I hope it was Miles, just from an upside standpoint. But
he's looked awesome. He's looked so good.
Mikal, Mikal fits more the modern 3-and-D, but Miles has so much upside, and he's such a freak. And he's done great with the Hornets. But how does it make you feel when you see executives rank Luka or have Luka 6 or 7 on their board?
That's my thing. Is like, I mean, I have some notes on him. He's had a great start to the year, and some people were surprised. And I feel like, there's maybe this Euro bias, whatever you want to call it. But the guy's the youngest MVP in league history and the second best basketball league in the world. And I kind of feel like that's going to translate to the NBA. I don't know about you. Like, I feel like the guy's good at basketball, playing in the second best environment he possibly can in terms of a professional league. So I don't understand why we were questioning him at all. I definitely had him 1. I also felt like Dallas was the perfect place for him, though, on draft night. I didn't have that as a possibility. They started out at 5. I didn't know the draft really started at number 2 with the Kings. Leading up, we kind of got the idea it was going to be Bagley. But prior to that, like you said, people were saying potentially Porter Jr., potentially, moving back for Luka, and all kinds of different things. And that was really where the draft was going to start. But the fact that the Mavs started the night at number 5 and got what I felt like was the best guy in the draft. Now, that could come back to bite them because they traded away this year's pick, and I don't know, they have 3 or 4 wins this year. It's got some kind of protection on it in the Trae Young trade. But yeah, it was just crazy to me that we were questioning what we're physically seeing with our eyes in terms of this guy playing basketball. It's not, stories. It's not like, Giannis, where he's playing in the 3rd league in Greece. Like, he's playing in the second best basketball league in the world. You can argue that point if you want, but in terms of a professional environment and not a collegiate one, he's doing everything he's supposed to do. And we're questioning him, as you said, potentially the 5th or 6th or 7th best prospect. It made no sense to me.
Yeah. So with Trae Young, I know you mentioned you're still kind of confused about him a little bit. With him, I see so much Luka in him. Obviously the big difference is the height difference and the versatility where you can play a Luka, 1 through 4. With Trae, he's a point guard. In today's NBA, they're both at times liabilities on defense. I would say they'll never be plus defenders, but they don't need to, as long as they can take good angles and just play smart, team defense. And I think they'll be fine. And as you know, today, our best offensive players are not great athletes, and that was one of the big knocks, right? James Harden, Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, he's a European that's slower. He can't jump, but I'm like, have you watched him play? And
yeah,
go ahead.
No, like, because we have this term athleticism, right? And we're thinking running, jumping, whatever. But in terms of hand-eye coordination, in terms of his ability to move on the court, he's extremely fluid. He's not stiff, like he might not have a 40-inch vertical, but he's not athletic, if that makes any sense. Like, he can move up and down the court. He's got plenty of moves in terms of his lateral quickness, especially offensively. He's got all the Euro steps, the right-handed floater in the lane, all that stuff he has. We just like to say, oh, he's from Europe. He's not a good athlete, but we're just referring to his ability to run and jump, which doesn't fully encompass everything that athleticism is.
Right. And if you're a Kings fan, and me being here covering the Kings,
I feel like I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, we have a guy by the name of Bogdanovic, and I kept telling people, if this man can play, if Joe Ingles can play, you better believe Luka Doncic will be able to play at the highest level. So, see, that's why I was so upset with, like, these executives believing that. It made no sense to me, and sometimes it makes me question these guys. But the most upsetting part is that Vlade and Peja, both having their roots back from Serbia, in that area, it made no sense. and here, Grant Napier, a local voice guy, has been here for years. He's Vlade's best friend. we get it. And he'll defend the Bagley pick till the day that the man gets fired, which I hope he doesn't, because right now the team is looking very promising.
Mm-hmm.
But his thing is, well, Vlade knows best. Like, Vlade knows these guys, and he has all his connections. And I'm like, you cannot tell me that. And, you know, watching him play with the Mavericks, you can't deny that he would have been the ideal pick, like the ideal fit in this high-tempo octane offense with De'Aaron Fox. And the whole argument about taking the ball away from De'Aaron Fox is the silliest thing ever, right?
Yeah. I have a couple here. The direction I felt like you were going to go was when you started talking about Bogdanovic, who played great against the Spurs the other night, by the way, had like 22. He's only played 3 games this year, as you know, was played fantastic against the Spurs. But if you're thinking about it, man, Luka would have fit so well in y'all's lineup. Like, that's like right there is the spot. You know what I mean? And with Bagley, it's not that him and Trey have both been better than I thought they would be initially. Bagley's playing 23 minutes a night. He's been a very productive guy when he's been on the floor. He's got a fluky 3-point shooting percentage because he's only shooting like 1 a game, but still all very positive things. But when you're looking at, like you said, the play style, playing up and down the court, and just the lineup in general, it's kind of tough to figure out a great fit when you had one potentially already with the second pick. But getting back to Trae Young, my thing is he's averaging as many turnovers right now as he is free throw attempts per game. They're both 4. That's too many. The percentages are not great. Low 40s from the field, something much lower than that from 3. I'm pretty sure it's around 30. But when he's on the court, like the Hawks have been competitive. They might not necessarily be winning a ton of games, but they've been competitive in a good amount of games, obviously last night in Golden State. But when he's on the floor, it's just like, even when he's already so young, these dudes know that they have a chance because he can score at any point. You know what I mean? Like it has that feeling that whether he lifts everybody else's play or not right now, he definitely lifts everybody else's confidence just because they know that he can score 10 straight by himself. Whether it happens all the time or not, there's definitely that feeling around him right now.
No doubt. And I think a lot of it also has to do with him playing on the Hawks, and, with the new head coach, with a bunch of guys who, let's be honest, they're not very – their talent is minor in comparison to other teams. So that has a lot to do with it. And, again, he had the same issue at Oklahoma. I felt like the big reason why he had a bad second half was because his talent wasn't great and, teams caught on to him. But he's such a smart player that I believe he's smart enough to transition and make adjustments to his game. But going back to Bagley, you mentioned that he has surprised you. Mm-hmm. But do you see him long-term becoming an all-star?
I think personally, no. If he does, it's going to be at the expense of somebody, meaning Cauley Stein's in a contract year. Mm-hmm. Those two, to my knowledge, at least at this point in their careers, they can't play on the floor at the same time together very well. Now, that can obviously change. Bagley could become this, a league average 3-point shooter. Obviously, his percentage is above that, but volume's an issue. So if he does become an all-star, I think it's, like I said, it's going to come at the expense of somebody else. But with his length and his athleticism and relative skill level, honestly, has definitely surprised me as well. It's a possibility, but it's, to me, going to have to come at the 5 spot, and his defense is going to have to improve because I just don't see him scaring teams so much at the 4 spot with his shooting ability, with the way the league is now, as well as he might have to guard Luke on some nights or Kevin Durant on some nights in that spot. You know what I mean? Like his build fits much more at the 5 if he can figure out his defensive issues. So with the Kings, at least, for him to be an all-star, it would definitely come at the expense of Cauley Stein, who I love. Like, even coming out of school initially, this is the player that he was always supposed to be, what he is right now. This is what he was drafted for. Runs the floor extremely hard, rolls to the rim, protects the rim, has a lot of switchability defensively and ball screens. This is what he was always supposed to be. And to a certain extent, what you're hoping Bagley will be eventually, just with a higher offensive skill level.
Right. And you mentioned a great point. Right now, he's shooting 44, 45%, or sorry, 38, it's close. It was 50%. Now it's like 45. But again, at one attempt,
It's not necessarily scaring anybody.
Right. And then on top of that, he's most effective when he's inside the paint. Coincidentally, that's where Cauley Stein is best around the paint. And Willie playing with DeMarcus and with Zebo last year,
yeah,
he wasn't able to be himself. And now he's becoming a lot more successful in his role because the Kings finally have a true stretch four in Belita, who is shooting lights out right now.
Incredible.
He's been the X factor for the Kings. So you either have Belita and Willie or Belita and Marvin. But then you run into the issue of, well, we have Belita and Bagley. They're both liabilities on defense. And if you have Bagley and Willie, well, they both want to be in the paint. So, again, it's more of a mismatch. And to me, the X factor in all of this is Harry Giles. He just went to Stockton. He had a great game, put up 30 points. He came back on Monday. They finally played him. It was a confidence thing. I honestly believe Harry Giles is the better offensive player just overall. I think he's just a better offensive player than Marvin Bagley. Thoughts on that?
He's an awesome passer. It's incredible, especially in summer league. Like, they didn't all, result in baskets. Some of them went out of bounds, but his vision is definitely up there. And I can remember, because I followed Harry Giles pretty closely, being from North Carolina, and just all the knee injury stuff that he went through. I mean, when he started playing well in summer league, that was the first time in like probably 3 years that he was fully healthy, like 100% healthy. He probably shouldn't have played when he was at Duke. Probably should have taken a redshirt year or just trained and then gone for the draft. There's 2 full years basically that he missed. I mean, he played a little bit at Duke and then obviously redshirted, quote unquote, for the Kings. But I can definitely see what you're saying. But I can just remember it was like an under 18 USA like national team with him and Jason Tatum on the same team. And they were dominating everybody. Jason Tatum was like one of the best athletes I'd seen. Harry Giles was averaging like 18 and 20 in international competition. And I do think that's still there because as much of a good athlete as he was, and to a certain extent still is, that wasn't necessarily always what made him so productive. It was his skill level, his ability to hit shots in the mid-range, and again, his passing ability. But it's one of those things you do have to kind of feature. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not necessarily something that you can just have him in that starting lineup and run off those other guys. It's more of a second unit thing right now where he can be featured a little bit in the high post and find cutters and everything passing wise. But that's the thing that's impressed me the most with him is definitely the passing ability relative, especially to Bagley.
Exactly. And we've never questioned, obviously he's probably the second or third best passer on the team behind Bogey and Fox. But what we question is his defense. He's lost out there, and I attribute that to the fact that he hasn't played real basketball in 2 years. Do you feel like that's a valid excuse?
I mean, I can get the the rust angle, but
like laterally.
Yeah, I can get the rust angle. I could be wrong, but he doesn't seem extremely long. His wingspan doesn't seem. He's kind of like you were talking about your guy Miles Bridges. One of the reasons I felt like people kind of slept on him a little bit was he's like 6'7" with like a 6'8" wingspan. Right. I could be wrong about Giles, but just watching him activity wise defensively, that doesn't seem to be an asset of his. But you're kind of in this weird spot now where I feel like whether that's an excuse or not, he definitely needs more run. But suddenly you're 2 games above 500, currently 8th in the West. So your priorities are kind of shifting, whereas in the past, especially later in the year, you would be prioritizing guys' development, whereas now you potentially have the opportunity to continue to stay above 500. So is it worth it to let him knock some of that rust off and maybe be much better in the second half of the year, or do you keep sending him back and forth, from the G League? I don't know. It's a tough decision.
Very tough. But they do have a luxury in playing Costa Koufis, who is a great defensive, a great interior defender. But the issue with that is when you have Bagley and Costa, they're both in the paint, right? It helps Bagley on defense because Costa can guard the center and do a great job. But then on offense, he doesn't really stretch the floor at times. And, it's the same issue. There are so many components to this and so many guys that have the same type of skill set, which again angers me when I watch Luka play because again Luka was the ideal fit with the Kings. But is there another rookie that has surprised you so far
Yeah.
this season?
I don't know if I would say surprised because I did like him in the draft. I think maybe I projected him like 12, wherever the Nuggets were at, which I guess was 12. But I don't think people are talking about him enough. He's fourth in the league among rookies in minutes, and that's Gilgeous-Alexander for the Clippers. He's been awesome. Like he's averaging almost 28 a game or 28 minutes a game, 10 and 3. So statistically, he doesn't look great, but he's shooting, over 40% from three. And I think SGA is a guy that he's more of a, you got to watch him to believe it. You might scroll through and say, oh, he's averaging 10 and 3. That's nice. They're the Clippers. That's nice. Clippers beat the Warriors the other night. They're extremely tough. They're extremely tough because they play 8, 9, 10 guys and they're all effective. They just keep running guys in and out. And for him to be averaging that many minutes for a team that has as much depth, guys like Patrick Beverley and Avery Bradley, guys like that, I don't think we're paying nearly enough attention to him, especially when you actually watch him play. His ability to get in the lane, as well as just patience in decision making. If you didn't know that he was a rookie, then you probably wouldn't be able to tell watching him, just because when he gets in the lane, he most of the time makes the right decision, kicking it out to guys or shooting. And again, not necessarily surprising, but someone that I don't think we're paying enough attention to.
Someone keeps asking, what do you think about Teodosic from the Clippers?
What do I think about him?
Yeah. Well, Shai's playing over him, so you know what I mean? Like, so that tells you a lot right now.
The Clippers are in a weird spot. So they've got young guys. I mean, Jerome Robinson is the other first-round pick. He's been basically in the G League. Actually, in high school, I played against Jerome Robinson. He's from Broughton High School, which is in Raleigh. I played against him. Devontae Graham as well. They're on the same high school team. They beat us every time, but I did play against them. Same thing. Gary Clark for the Rockets. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yep.
Playing fairly well for them. He's from Clayton, North Carolina. He was putting up triple doubles in high school to be able to get that offer to go to Cincinnati. He was awesome. But the Clippers are in a weird spot because they have pieces that are potentially attractive this summer, either via trade or for another star, whoever you want to throw in there, to come and play with them. So I think part of the reason that maybe Shai is playing as much as he is one, he's younger, more athletic, can create, which is something that they need. But also, he, more than anybody else in terms of the unknowns, probably has the best chance to turn into something really, really attractive to free agents. And they're going to be big players in that this summer as well as the following. So I would give that answer more than anything else, is I feel like showcasing is as much what the seasons right now in the following are about for the Clippers than anything else.
You're saying they're going to trade him to the Wizards for Beal.
The problem with that is then they don't have any money then they don't have any cap space this summer. Everybody wants to throw Bradley Beal everywhere. And I just did a Wizards video maybe last week, just talking about how they got to where they are and how they could potentially fix that. And then I've got another video coming out. Today's Wednesday. I got one coming out on Friday, just going over some potential trades, and Otto Porter Jr. is involved in that, and a plan to potentially get them KD in 2020 and all that. But everybody wants to throw Bradley Beal in all these different scenarios, the Lakers potentially, but you can't put Philly potentially. You can't put them on a team that has cap space this summer unless you don't think that anybody worth $25 to $30 million is going to be available. I love Beal. He's young. He's on a relatively fair contract, but you can't just start throwing him on the Clippers and take up all their cap space, or throw him on Philly and take up all their cap space, unless that's the final move. Like if that's the final piece of the puzzle for Philly, then that makes sense. But for the Lakers, I would say not so much.
So before we move on to other topics, I do want to close this on both you and I feel like I can speak for both of us. We don't think Bagley is bad. We both think he's good. When we talk about Luka and we talk all these things about Luka and how great he is, it's not a knock on Bagley, right? It's more of, wow, Luka is that good.
Correct. Yeah. I like I said, Bagley, when we both had a similar opinion on him prior to the draft and got picked higher than either of us probably would have, but it's a very strong top 5 or 6 in terms of the draft. And it's not, he's doing what he's supposed to on the court. The fit is a little bit questionable, which is not something that he can control. But in terms of when he's on the court, things that he can control, he's doing about as much as you would expect him to in the minutes that he's either being given or has earned, right? And so the fit next to Cauley-Stein, somewhat questionable. His fit at the 4, the 5 with Bielitsa or whoever, somewhat questionable. But as a player and a prospect, I don't know what else you could ask out of him through his first 15 or so NBA games.
I agree 100% with that. So put your Kings GM hat on. How can you get Otto Porter Jr. on the Kings because they currently need a small forward? What are you willing to give up?
The thing, I'd have to look specifically. I mean, I know you guys have some expiring, Jamon Shumpert, Randolph, so matching money wouldn't be an issue. Part of the issue, which I got into, people came at me a little bit on Twitter the other day with, is the fact that the Kings obviously don't have their pick this coming season, this coming draft. And not that they would give that up for Otto Porter, but in terms of draft assets, like they can't give up their 2020 because I already gave up their 2019, so that's not available. And then you're going way too far in the future. But if I'm the Wizards, I just want to get out from under it. Like they are just so stuck. Porter's not playing well for them. They don't have realistic cap space until 2021, basically. But if they get rid of Porter Jr., they can be players in 2020. So for the Kings, there's options there, like I said, with cap filler. It's just so hard to find a market for Porter Jr. with his contract because nobody's really going to give up a ton for him, and the Wizards might want more than that. So maybe, I mean, Shump is playing well for y'all, but Shump, Randolph, and
is that enough though? Shump, Randolph, and maybe I don't know.
The third guy has to be an asset. Like the first two
picks.
Yeah, like the last part has to be an asset. The first two help the Wizards in terms of their cap, but they're still trying to make the playoffs. Not that Shump wouldn't help them, but
this team right now, this Wizards team is not making the playoffs.
No, and I took some heat for putting them, and we're going to talk about the East in a second, for putting them, I don't know what I did, maybe 6th or 7th in the East, and I took some heat for that, but I didn't expect them to be this bad. But the way I put it in the Wizards video was things started off poorly, and then when you're in a position, it's 2018, and you're preaching Dwight Howard as the potential fix for your team, you're probably not in a good spot. But I know we're going to talk about the Kings, but just because we're
how about this? Justin Jackson, Shumpert, and Zebo for Otto Porter,
and maybe like a second
and like 2 seconds.
Justin Jackson's not playing that well.
He's not very good. And look at coming into that class, I was so against the Kings drafting him.
He was Giles, right? Him and Giles were the 16 and the 20 that they got for Zach Collins. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So they traded number 10 for 15 and 20. And, when they drafted 15, I was so upset. I was the only guy in Sacramento that said the Kings should have drafted Donovan Mitchell at 10. I'm on record, articles, podcasts. This is like 3 weeks before the draft. And everyone laughed at me. And I was like, okay. I just watched a ton of film on Mitchell, and I thought he was going to be very good. I didn't think he was going to be this good.
Yeah.
But just the fact that the Kings needed good players and guys who pride themselves on defense, because he came to the Kings, worked out with the Kings. He actually worked out with Cam Oliver the same day. And when we interviewed him, I was so impressed with this attitude. I mean, he fit the culture thing, right? And then his attitudes fit or his defense fit the needs of this team. And they just needed good guard play. So that to me was the perfect fit. And it happened. They traded it away. And I'm happy with Harry. But at the same time, they could have drafted OG at 15. If you're going to draft a guy with 3 major knee surgeries, a guy with 1 major knee surgery wasn't going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he. I think I did. Gosh, I think I did a video like very early beginning last season, and it was basically titled like 3 rookies that already look like busts, basically. And it was a little bit of a jump to conclusion. I think it was like 25 games in, but it was just a place to have a conversation about guys that haven't looked great. I think Malik Monk was on there, and then I'm pretty sure Justin Jackson was on there as well. I mean, watching him at North Carolina, and I actually watched him in person when he was in high school. They have this big tournament in Raleigh every year, and he played for like some homeschool, some weird team. And I thought he was good there. And his scoring ability, obviously, in the in-between floaters, he's got these nifty finishes in college, always been pretty skinny. But the big jump for him right before he came in the league was his three-point shooting. He wasn't a great shooter up until the year before he declared, and that just hasn't translated. Like, I know his first year he spent some time in the G League to try and get his confidence up, and I think right now he's one of the few guys that played every game, right, and not necessarily started every game, played every game.
You guys leave him wide open. The Spurs are leaving him wide open.
Yeah. And that's when you're trying to be a young wing in the league, you got to, if you're not going to be, you know, a Luka and a playmaker, then you've got to be able to guard and you've got to be able to shoot. And he's just not doing either of those right now at an NBA level, frankly. Like, it's just doesn't have it. You know, like you said, OG can defend. He's not an outstanding shooter yet, but he's getting there, and just hasn't happened for Justin Jackson. Sometimes that happens and then guys catch on later on. But so to get back to the Porter thing, I mean, if you put together those three and some kind of pick, depending on what time of the year it is, I mean, if the Wizards are 10 games below 500 at the trade deadline, then that's becomes more realistic for them. But you're right. I mean, it would be nice to have a three that, you know, was the MVP of the international league that they played for, and probably should have been number one overall pick.
My stomach hurts just thinking about that. Who's the best team in the East right now?
So preseason, this is what I had. I did my Eastern Conference predictions. I had, in order, 1 through 4, Boston, Toronto, Philly, and Milwaukee. Those were the 4 with the Pacers right there. And then the other 3, just mix and match, right? I still believe in the Celtics. I still think that their issue is more of a shot selection thing. They're all kind of very weirdly trying to figure everything out because everybody's suddenly there. Tatum's taking too many long twos, not enough threes, not enough stuff at the rim. Kyrie got a haircut and started playing better, and then now he's kind of on and off. Jaylen Brown is all up in his own head and can't make a shot. But I still think that they just got to figure out how to play together. Hayward's playing too much. They're not taking the right shots. But I don't know, probably 30 games in, I think you'll see them reel off 5, 6, 7 in a row, and they'll be fine. Toronto has impressed me, specifically without Kawhi. I mean, they're 9-1 with Kawhi. They just lost their first game when he played to the Pelicans. They lost by 16. He was a -15 in the game, and he's missed almost a third of their games. But their depth and guys like Siakam and guys like Anunoby, like you talked about, has really impressed me. And I think it's those two, and you can start to see Philly and Milwaukee on the fringes. Milwaukee obviously started very well, beat the Warriors on the road. But I still think it's those two. To me, the best team in the East, whether the standings reflect that at the end, is going to be Boston. But they might not end the season with the best record in the East.
So you did not have the Bucks in your top 3 for the preseason?
Not in the top 3. I had them in the top 4. They were 4th. I wasn't as much on the Coach Bud hype train as I am now before the season. Because I like growing up, like, and still the Nets were my team. I love J Kidd, and I guess I was just in denial. I didn't want to accept how bad of a job he was doing with the Bucks. And then poor Joe Prunty had to go out there as a lame duck coach and coach them through the end of the year. Like, realistically, that team should have made the Eastern Conference Finals. They should have beat the Celtics in the first round. They lost to them 4-3, and obviously the Celtics ended up making the conference finals. Realistically, that's what should have happened. Now, one thing with them, though, is no matter how well they do this season, 2 of their top 3 guys are free agents this summer, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe, and they already have a pretty high payroll for a, you know, whatever you want to call them, low market team, you know, small market team. So whatever they do this season, they're probably going to have to pay a lot more money to do it again next year. So they better make it worth it this year, whatever they're going to do. But regardless of how they finish, like I said, I think Boston's the best team. That's going to be such a fun semifinals in the East playoffs. No matter who's playing who, any combination of those 4 is going to be really exciting, with the potential for Indiana to crash the party if they did, you know, end up beating somebody else in the first round.
So this is how I feel about the East. I believe the Raptors and the Bucks have the 2 clear-cut best players in the East. Would you agree there?
I would, yes.
So in a 7-game series, as you just mentioned, last season, the Celtics were pretty bad on the road, but when they were at home, they were pretty good. I think the Bucks will end up with a better record. So they're going to have home court advantage. And in a Game 7, for the most part, whoever has a better player, for the most part, wins the games. So do you agree that if it came to a Game 7, Bucks-Celtics, with an actual legitimate bona fide head coach and not, you know, last year's guy, would you bet your money on the Bucks being the Celtics?
Who has home court? Which one did you say? The Bucks?
Yeah, so Bucks Celtics, home court, Milwaukee, Game 7. Giannis, best player. It's a toss-up to me, honestly, and I don't know if you agree between Brad and Bud. I don't think Bud gets enough respect, especially with that terrible Hawks team that won like 60-plus games. I mean, they had a bunch of second and third options on that team.
Yeah. I would say the Bucks, but I wouldn't bet on it. Like, I wouldn't be that confident in it just because that's probably the worst matchup for the Bucks in that scenario, is just because the Celtics have so many guys to throw at Giannis, and they can just build a wall, and that puts a lot of pressure on. I mean, Chris Middleton's fantastic, dark horse all-star guy this year, but that puts a lot of pressure on guys like Eric Bledsoe, Brook Lopez, or Sonny Ilyasova to make jump shots. So if you have a cold shooting game from those guys, I mean, Giannis is great, but he can't score every point, so he's going to have to kick it out to some guys. And if you're not making shots, which is the case with every team. My big issue with the Bucks is, outside of the regular season, like I said, they could finish above everybody, or even, the Celtics, Raptors in the regular season standings. Lopez doesn't, as much as I love him, doesn't scare me in a playoff series. Defensively is going to be an issue. Ilyasova, similar thing. I just don't know that they have multiple sets of 5 guys you can put on the court that are going to be able to guard, shoot, and create plays. And I think the Raptors and Celtics have that. You know what I mean? Like, you have Bledsoe, you have Middleton, you have Giannis, Ilyasova, Lopez, John Henson. You can mix and match, but for multiple sets of 5 throughout the game, I question their depth there, especially the big guy spots.
So you're not a Brook Lopez fan, and
I am a Brook Lopez is my guy. I loved him. I loved him when he was with the Nets. But I'm talking about present day Brook Lopez. First of all, I love sniper Brook Lopez, shooting like 8 for 12 from 3. Love it. But in a playoff series, defensively,
not sustainable is what I'm trying to ask you, because I feel like you're insinuating that his shot's not sustainable and it's fake.
No, it's more defensively for him. Like, is he going to be? It's one of those things that people continue to come back to, is you get a guy and everybody's like, well, can they stay on the floor against Golden State? You know what I mean? Like, that was the Cavs issue in the finals a good amount of the time. They didn't have enough guys that could guard and shoot and can stay on the floor in a playoff series. And I think Lopez is the same way. Great in the regular season. When you come around against good teams in the playoffs, is he going to be able to stay on the floor defensively? Not sure.
So I feel like Carmelo Anthony should retire. Feel like, because he makes everyone worse. So do you feel like the Celtics should pick him up?
I don't think they need him. The teams that I have read, and again, these things can change daily, New Orleans, Portland, the Lakers, and the only reason he hasn't been released is the Rockets are just trying to get somebody to take him off waivers so they don't have to pay his contract the rest of the year, because they don't want to deal with the luxury tax and all that. Otherwise, I feel like he would have been released by now. But the crazy thing is, like, even if you want to go with this notion that Carmelo still thinks he's a top 20 top 15 player, still thinks he's great, and doesn't want to accept any other kind of role, even if you go with that, he's at least come off the bench in Houston, and all he has to do is make spot up threes. Like, nobody's expecting him to lock down anybody defensively. He used to be a great rebounder. He's not one anymore. All he's had to do in Oklahoma City and Houston is make spot up threes, and he can't do it. And maybe that's because throughout his career hasn't been something he's been asked to do. But I think he's washed. Unfortunately, I think he's done. People throw around funny ideas about him going back to the Knicks and helping them tank. You know what I mean? Like, but that's I don't know what else he's good for at this point. Unfortunately, I mean, he's relatively young for today's. I mean, Vince Carter's playing. He's 41. I think Melo's about to turn 34. Relatively young still. His game just hasn't aged well.
Yeah, and I believe it's an ego thing. Vince Carter was on the Kings last year, on the Hawks this year. He's accepted his role as
my guy. I love Vince.
Right, as a mentor, head coach. And I feel like Melo's ego is way too big and just doesn't allow him to play his role as a role player. If Dwayne Wade can come off the bench, my brother, you got to come off the bench too. You know what I mean? Like, he just hasn't accepted that.
And as weird as it is for me to say, that generation of guys is almost done. Like, Bosh obviously can't play anymore because of the health issues. This is D Wade's last year. Melo's looks like he's winding down. Bron's a machine, but it's about time for, guys like KD and James Harden and Russ and those guys to kind of be I mean, not that D Wade and Melo have been the top guys, but like, they're still around. Bron's still around. And it's just weird that they're almost done. Like those guys just been around for so long, it feels like. But no, Melo he's just washed. Like there's no other way to explain it. And it happened so quickly because the year before Phil Jackson decided to trade him, like there were these positive headlines about how, oh, he's a team player, his assists are up, you know, he's doing things the team needs him to do. They weren't like the first 20 games that before Derek Fisher got fired, they were like 500, things were going well. And then it just fell off a cliff. And Phil Jackson was like, forget this guy, we're going to trade him and get Mitchell Robinson in the long run. That's what they ended up getting.
That was nice.
Yeah. And that was the crazy thing too. Like the Melo video you talked about, Giles turned out to be involved in that. Super long term. Harry Giles was like he was in the Melo deal, and then he was in the Mozgov deal. Or no, he was in the Melo deal, and then he went to Portland because Yusuf Nurkic went to Portland, and they sent Nurkic in a first for Plumlee. Denver did, and then that pick ended up with the Kings and became Harry Giles.
That's why I think that video is so funny. Like, you moved all these components, right? And then I was like, whoa, Harry Giles was in that Melo trade. And it's crazy how the NBA works, and all these picks are, you know, they like keep like an archive of all these things. And
that's what I couldn't understand. Like I'm using Basketball Reference, like great resources, right? They've got the transactions page. I can follow Timofey Mozgov and all the pieces in that deal for years. I don't know who puts all that together. Like my head hurt just figuring it out when it's all laid out in front of me, and I'm drawing on the whiteboard, and I'm doing everything to follow all the pieces, and somebody else has to give me that information in the first place. It was nuts, but I'm looking forward to doing more of them for sure.
Completely fascinating. So as of right now, you have the Raptors versus Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, my Eastern Conference predictions prior to the season were, like I told you, my top four. I have the Celtics in the finals beating the Raptors. I think I said in 6, and Giannis was my MVP preseason. And I feel most confident about that than anything else right now. I think
Celtics will beat the Raptors.
No, I feel most confident in Giannis as the MVP than any of the other predictions. But yes, right now I would say so, because I mean Kawhi's numbers, if you look at them, are very similar to the last full year he spent in San Antonio. Is averaging like 24 a game, efficient from the field as well as from 3, assists, rebounds, steals, all of it. But he's already missed nearly a third of their games. He's missed 4 of the 14. And like I said, they've been great without him. They've been 9-1 when he's played. But they're gonna need him. And I understand that that's why they're resting him so much. A lot of them are like second half of back-to-backs. I get that. But that's the one thing that makes me nervous. And there are obviously teams that have durability issues, Kyrie, Gordon Hayward, all that. But that's the one thing with the Raptors that makes me nervous is they have all this great depth, but they need Kawhi to make the finals. They just do. And that pattern of him missing a third of their games every 15 makes me nervous, or would make me nervous if I was a Raptors fan.
Do you put any stock into Draymond Green and KD's current fight?
There's two things here. One, I don't think I've ever seen the NBA community as a whole, either on Twitter or whatever, outside of the Warriors, root for this kind of thing so much. Like everybody's like, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. Like, this is what we've been waiting for. This is it. KD is going to leave. Because I just put out a video like a week ago about like why KD could potentially leave, these places he could go. It's about his legacy, blah, blah, blah. But then I started to think about it, just listening to other people. Like they have a chance to win like 4 or 5 championships in a row, realistically, if he stays. Like if they pay everybody, right? Like if they're just like, screw it, we're gonna have $200 million in payroll. We're gonna give Clay, Dre, KD, they're all gonna have max contracts. Like they realistically could win 5 in a row. But now it's like, it's almost like these guys know, right? It's almost like Dre said what everybody was thinking. And the report that came out like late last night on The Athletic talking about, you know, Dre saying, oh, you're holding the whole team hostage and you're holding your free agency decision over everybody. I don't understand why you won't just commit. I've been here the whole time. You just showed up halfway through, all that stuff. I think it's a real thing. I don't think they would have suspended him if it wasn't a real thing. They would have sat him, but he lost money. Like they suspended him. He lost money.
So do you trade Draymond?
No, you don't. They're going to finish out the year. And I don't know. I think I saw something today that said odds Draymond gets moved before the deadline, like no or yes is like plus 200. Like it's not likely that he's going to be traded, and I wouldn't trade him. It wouldn't make any sense. But I even if they win the championship, like I think is a realistic possibility that Katie's going to leave. And I know that everybody's like rooting for that. And the other part of that I was thinking about is, for the most part, I feel like everybody's rooting for the Kings for this, like, to be real, right? For the hot start to be a real thing. Everybody wants to believe. Like everybody has their caveats, right? And that was the thing that first came to my mind about the Kings. Was I put out this video like 2 weeks ago, basically titled, "Don't trade with the Boston Celtics." Like, don't do it. Ever since Ainge and Stevens have been there, they win every trade. Don't mess with them. And at the end, I talked about how they have the potential to get another high pick because they have the Kings pick this year. And when I said that, people came at me in the comments or on Twitter like, oh, at the time they were like 2-2, like 500. Like, oh, the Kings are actually pretty good this year. And what I said was, okay, I recognize that. They were, at the time, they just won 5 straight. They were 6-3 at the time that I said this. I said, here's their next 10 games. They get the Bucks, Raptors, Wolves, Lakers, Spurs, Grizzlies, Rockets, Thunder, Jazz, and Warriors. I said, check back with me after Thanksgiving, and I think that'll be a good time to evaluate where everything's at, right? So again, they were 6-3 at the time. They're 8-6 now. They lost 2 straight, the Bucks and Raptors. Not anything bad whatsoever. They were competitive, especially in the Raptors game. Beat the Wolves, and then the Spurs one was big to me because Popovich was very complimentary after the game about the team and about the quote unquote culture that they were building. And then Bogdanovich obviously having a really big game. That could potentially be a turning point. Again, I want to see how they finish out the rest of these 10 games. But like I said, I think everybody wants it to be real. Whether it's a playoff appearance or not, I think people really, really want the Kings to continue the start because it's a fun team to watch, man. I mean, Fox is incredible. Like, Buddy Hield is realistically one of the best shooters in the league, and I think we just don't pay attention to him just because he's a bit of an older guy relative to his draft class. He's 25, but you know what I mean? He's a 4-year guy. He's supposed to be good. But him and Fox have been crazy good. Cauley-Stein, it makes me so happy to see him actually be good and be freed up to be the sole big on the floor. And the ultimate flip-flopper, Bielitsa, just coming on over and saying, oh, I'll take the 3-year deal instead of the 1 that he was going to sign with Philly. And yeah, he's been incredible too.
So that's the perfect segue into Kings talk, right? You already did it, man. But you mentioned Buddy Hield and the fact that he may be one of the best shooters. I said before the year, I think when it comes down to not just efficiency, but just pure shooters, obviously Steph and Clay are number 1 and 2. I think he has the potential to be the 3rd best shooter in the NBA.
Who else is in that? Who else is in that conversation? Like who else are you putting him up against?
Well, you obviously got to put in, Korver, JJ Redick, just out of respect. But I just feel like Buddy Hield. I watch him every day. I was talking to him, earlier at practice, and just his mechanics are so perfect. And his footwork is not Clay's footwork in terms of alignment with your shoulder. It's a little bit to the side, but his release is so fast that he gets it off at any point. So I just feel like he's going to be number 3 sooner rather than later. Would you say that's facts or just straight foolishness?
I think realistically he's definitely top 5. You can put Redick wherever you want.
Right.
Put whoever you want as the 5th guy, but I don't think you can deny that he's a top 5 shooter in the league because it's not a conversation we have often. Everybody's just like Curry 1, Clay 2.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's it. Like, it's not a conversation we have often. So I could be completely blanking on whoever the 5th guy would be. But the thing for him is like those years when he first got there, I feel like were so beneficial because they let him do. It's almost like the Devin Booker thing in Phoenix. Like they let him do everything where he would create in ball screens. He would attack closeouts. He wouldn't just, not that he just shoots now, but my point is his game grew so much to where he's a better shooter now because you have so many other things to respect. Like Korver, and to a certain extent, you know what he's going to do, and he's not going to scare you in any other way. So a lot of times his shots are more difficult. He still makes them, but with Hield, you have a lot more stuff to worry about, even if he's not a great athlete, even if he doesn't have great size at that spot. Yeah, I would definitely say he's top 5. Yeah, top 5 shooter in the league. And again, it's just not a conversation we have a lot. and also just not a guy that we talk about a lot. But him and Fox are both averaging almost 19 a game. Strangely, that they've scored the exact same amount of points so far this year. And then they get Memphis on Friday. But I'm keeping a bigger eye on the Kings' progress than I had anticipated I would prior to the year, to be completely honest.
So I also asked Fox if he changed anything at all today in terms of his jump shot.
I watched the clip, yeah.
Yeah, he's shooting above 40%. Do you think he's changed? I feel like when I watched him play last year, he's shooting more with arc. You know, I play basketball, and I know you play basketball because you mentioned it earlier. I feel like when you put more arc into your shot, it's a higher possibility that it goes in, or it gives your big man a chance to rebound, as opposed to it being more like a flatliner shot.
Yeah, it's tough to evaluate mechanics in game unless you're Markelle Fultz and you can't get the ball to the rim. Like it's tough to, because it's such minor adjustments, right? And there's so many ways to shoot it realistically. I mean, Reggie Miller had one of the ugliest releases I've ever seen and one of the greatest shooters ever. So I don't know that it's necessarily anything different. I just think, one, we also have to keep in mind sample size. It's 15 games in. He's probably not going to be a 42% shooter for the entire season. But if he can be an all-star, right? Yeah, if he can be league average, right? If he can be a 37% shooter from three, that's incredible progress, in my opinion. Because in college, he wouldn't even shoot them. Like he'd shoot on occasion, but on a much shorter line, he wouldn't even shoot them. My thing with him is I still think he shoots a few too many long twos, like 20-foot jump shots, still a few too many of those. I mean, he's 21 years old. You know what I mean? Like it's not a part of his game that I'm expecting him to have 100% down. He's only 21. But that would be a criticism for me. Still a few too many long twos, but I don't think you can deny that the jump shot has improved. And there's one thing I did make a note to mention is most improved player. So Fox's numbers weren't bad last year, but right now, if he sustains these, big jump, right? But the debate being had was comparing him for most improved to a guy like Zach LaVine, where came back from an ACL, looked okay at the end of last year. You can't really count his stats from last year. And he's obviously improved a ton. But first to second year guys, you kind of assume that they're going to improve, right? So the conversation is, even if he's improved more than Zach, I don't know if you can argue that or not, would he still have a case for most improved going from year one to year two because it's expected?
That's tough, man, because sometimes it's the opposite, where you have a good rookie year like a Mitchell or a Simmons, and then you digress like a sophomore slump type thing. So I think it's real. The improvement is real as it can get. Last game against the Spurs, I asked him if he knew the playbook. He said he knew the playbook, all of it, last year. But Dave Yeager, being the coach that he is, he gave him the keys this year. Last year, he came off the bench for Georgia Hill, which was a joke. Georgia Hill is not very good, and they should have never signed him. That's a whole different conversation. So this year, he's playing with so much confidence, and I just think from a leadership standpoint, he took that next level. And yeah, obviously LaVine should have been the king as well, which is a whole nother conversation.
How's that?
I mean,
oh, you guys, the contract. Sorry, yeah, I forgot you guys offered and matched. Yeah,
and even at Summer League, I was right in front of him when he said he was talking to all the Kings guys. I thought I was a king. I thought I was going to play, and I was like, whoa, like Vlade saw how good or the upside of a LaVine. Can you imagine LaVine, Buddy, Bogey, and Fox just in this awesome like octane offense?
Every night would be like 120 to 115.
I mean, they're averaging 120 points already.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like it's real. But you're right. How do you measure his success or his improvement over LaVine's improvement? That's always going to be subjective. I think it's going to come down to wins. And if the Kings are relevant to some extent in the West, then you got to give that to Fox.
Yeah, because, I mean, Markkanen hasn't played yet this year. Right. The Bulls have too many bigs. Jabari Parker's a disaster.
Chris Dunn played.
Chris Dunn, yeah. It was funny because I have a lot of Bulls people on Twitter. I'm absolutely addicted to Twitter, NBA Twitter specifically. I just love it. And it was like 3 games into the year, the Bulls were like 0-3. All of a sudden, you know, obviously before the year, Markkanen was hurt, and then Chris Dunn's out with the hamstring or whatever it is. And then everybody's like, okay, so we're actually tanking. Like we weren't just like a little bit tanking. Like we are all in now. All of a sudden, a couple games into the year, he surprised me, Levine. I mentioned him in a video just talking about how I didn't know if that much money was worth it. It's, whatever it is, 19 and a half a year, seemed like a lot for a guy that's coming off an ACL, didn't look great at the end of last year. And then, he starts the year, scores 30 in this first 5 or 6 games.
Right.
And I'd completely forgotten that you guys made him an offer sheet. And who knows, maybe you can keep going with the Brooklyn Nets style and you just keep throwing offers to restricted free agents and screwing up everybody else's cap space so you can keep your own. Because Otto Porter is them. Alan Crabb is them, who they ended up getting on the team. Tyler Johnson is them. You want to talk about bad contracts? The Nets are a big part of those. I mean, you guys are going to have, what, $60 million in cap space this summer? It's not a small number.
Well, a little bit less if they do, like you said earlier, if they decide to go Willie Cauley-Stein. And that's one of the things that I want to bring up. People always ask me, how much money will he demand? And how much money does he deserve? And I said, those are two different things. How much money will he demand? I know for a fact a lot, knowing him and talking to his circles. How much does he deserve? It will always be subjective. This is the first year where he's been consistent. He's had one bad game, and that was against the Lakers. He always has a bad game against McGee for whatever reason. So I said this, I think, against the Spurs. If he can average 13 and 13, then I'd give him whatever money he wants, because then he would be all in on his role. Willie is known to say, awesome quotes after the game. So from a media standpoint, you love his quotes and you love the stuff he says, because he's always going to say, oh, I'm as good as Porzingis. When in reality, he's never shot a 3 in his life. Right? But he says things like that. That's cool for us. Like, that's juicy stuff. But at the same time, being a Kings fan, it's difficult, man, because I don't know if it's real. I hope it is, and I've always said this. He's so gifted and so talented, but he needs to put it together for at least 25 games. He's done it for 14. Can he do it for 25 games? Because he's done it in the past where he's done 2 weeks and he disappears for 3 weeks. He'll go back for 2 weeks. And I think I'm leaning more towards that this is real, because now, again, as you said, he's the only true big, and he's playing with a true stretch forward. I think it's sustainable. Now, what does he deserve? I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, it's like everybody wants, like a salary range. This is what a guy's going to get. And I had a series on the channel late last year in the off season called Free Agent Friday, where every Friday I would take a look at a different free agent, and I would try my best to give a salary range. And you don't realize until you sit down and look at it, and you're like, all these people are going to judge this number. Like, what is it supposed to be? The problem with Cauley-Stein is, for the Kings at least, is one, somebody's going to pay him if he sustains this. It's not, he's restricted, but someone's going to throw money at him. Okay. He's 25. This is the one big contract he's going to have. Realistically, he's not going to be this good when he's 30, when this contract is over. He wants to get his money, as he should. Nothing wrong with that. But all of these guys are under contract longer than he is right now. Labissiere, Giles, Bielitsa, and Bagley, all front court guys. Okay. Now you could say that all of them, with the exception of maybe Bagley, can play off of him in terms of being a little bit more perimeter oriented. But it's one of those things where he might be worth it to other teams that don't have as many young bigs, but he might not be worth that much to Sacramento. And it could be a Nerlens Noel thing. We all thought Nerlens Noel was going to get paid, and he got offered to get paid by, I guess it was the Mavericks at the time. And now he's on a minimum deal in OKC. Dang. But with big specifically, it's kind of like the Ayton versus Luka thing before the draft that I mentioned. You can get a guy like Clint Capella, who does a lot of really good things for the Rockets, defends the rim, does everything you want from a high efficiency, low usage big guy. But that doesn't necessarily make him worth $30 million a year when you can get someone much cheaper to do 75% of that. Personally, I feel like it's easier to get a guy like JaVale McGee that can do 75% of what a much higher paid big can do, rather than get a lower tier guard to do 75% of what De'Aaron Fox can do.
Right.
if that makes sense. So for big guys specifically, it's really tough to put a number on it. But I mean, with his youth and like I said, kind of the way he fits, and there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of teams that are going to be left at the end, say we've got 50 million in space and I don't know what to spend it on. It's kind of like the summer of 2015 and 16 all over again, because all those guys are coming off the books is what's happening. And he's probably going to end up getting more than Capella just because there wasn't any money last year. You know what I mean? Like, I think Capella's is like 15 a year, and the Rockets slow played that so hard because they knew that nobody else had money, and they just waited and waited and waited and eventually made an offer that he accepted. The Kings don't have that luxury. So I would say it's going to be more than Capella. Again, assuming he, sustains this level of play.
Did he get 15 million though?
I can tell you. I can tell you.
Yeah.
It's a good deal. It's a team friendly deal. I'll put it that way. I'll figure out the number though.
So yeah, so with Willie, someone just said 4 years, $80 million.
That's a Levine deal right there is what that is.
Right.
And so Capella's was 5 years and 90. So he's making 15 this year, and it basically goes up $1 million for the next 4 years after that. So it goes 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 over the next 5 years, which when you're considering that the cap is going up every year and the position they were in where they just given Chris Paul a max, James Harden's on a super max soon. They did not want to pay as much money as he probably was worth. And again, they were in a much better situation salary cap wise, or excuse me, in terms of the other team's salary cap than the Kings are. So it's one of those things where it's tough. Like Clint Capella got a contract here in the wrong half season, and Willie Cauley-Stein got his contract up in the right one. Seems like.
I feel like 13 to 15 million is where it should be.
Someone's going to give more than that. Someone's going to give more than that.
Going to get more than that if he sustains his performances.
Because this is what you got to understand is, like, we're talking about the summers of 2015 and 16 and those guys coming off the books. It's a very similar climate. There's like 9 teams that if they don't do anything are going to have max cap space. It's like 4 or 5 more that can create it if they want to. And there's just not enough guys for that much money, which is how you get into Ian Mahinmi making $17 million this year. Okay? Like that's how you get there. And I'm not saying that Cauley-Stein is that,
right.
But if the Kings keep him, as much as I don't want to put a downer on your fan base, if the Kings keep him, I would imagine it's going to be for a deal that he is not worth. Someone's going to give him a deal that is too much. And if they want to keep him, it's probably going to be for a non-team friendly deal, put it that way.
You're right. And someone just said, the Kings are going to try to overpay him if he's consistent, which is true because, as you said, small market teams have to overpay for good players. Do you see any potential free agent this season or the following summer that could fill that role if the Kings don't trade for if they don't trade for Otto Porter? Can someone like a Tobias Harris be an option?
I love Tobias Harris, and I think he's someone that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the big guy for the Clippers in terms of if they're going to bring in other guys and then they're going to try and bring back Tobias Harris. He's an interesting option. The video on Sunday actually is kind of NBA free agents that we're not talking about. We want to keep talking about KD and Kemba and Chris Middleton and all those guys. But in terms of on the wings, yeah, I mean, Tobias Harris would be there. Paul Millsap is not a wing, but he's a 4. He could potentially be up. He's a team option with the Nuggets. Off the top of my head, though, I can't think of anybody realistically that would be a 3. But like I said, if overpaying is an option, then there are some possibilities there. Yeah.
So would you give Tobias $20 to $23 million on this team, knowing what you know right now, knowing that they have a huge void at the 3? Would you pay him $23 million? I
really like him as like a combo 3-4 guy though.
Right, right.
I mean,
right. So at times you'll start him at 3, then move Belisa to the bench, and then you'll go small pretty much.
Are you keeping Cauley-Stein? Or are you like let's just say that someone gives Cauley-Stein a 4-year 80, okay?
Right.
And then Tobias Harris is an option. If you're not going to keep Cauley-Stein, then yeah, whatever the number that you said, 22, I probably would. because he's still relatively young. He's not going to be in his late 30s or early 30s making a ton of money. It'll be over in 4 years. And that gives you the ability to slide, Bagley to the 5 or Giles to the 4-5, Tobias Harris to 3-4. Gives you a lot of different versatile options. So if you're not going to keep Cauley Stein, yeah, Tobias Harris would be an option. I don't think you can keep both, because then you're at the salary cap and you've got a team that realistically is probably bottom 3 playoff spot in the West, best case.
You said
like 6, 7, 8 in the playoffs.
6, 7, 8.
And you're paying, and you can't improve in free agency beyond that if you're keeping Cauley Stein and Tobias Harris. If you keep them both, you know what I mean. So
you would lock them in if they had Tobias and Willie long term, with the assuming that De'Aaron gets better and that Bagley. So now you would have a little issue.
That's the thing,
because you like him at 3 and 4. That's essentially where Bagley should be. What do you do in that situation? It's hard, right?
So if I'm the Kings and I'm projecting this, unless something happens that is unforeseen and you can get Cauley Stein on a Clint Capella deal, as well as he's played this season, I'm not interested in overpaying to best case scenario win a couple of games in the first round of the playoffs. Okay. What I would be okay with is letting Willie walk if someone gives him a lot of money, because in my opinion, Bagley's long-term future is at 5. He's got to fix some things defensively. So if you're going to invest in number 2 overall pick in a guy, you might as well start putting him at his position. It's like the Magic trying to play Aaron Gordon at the 3 for 3 years. Like that's a similar situation if you want to continue to try and put Bagley at the 4.
I don't want to talk about, but yeah, go ahead.
And so if you did that, then you have room to bring in a guy like Tobias Harris to bring that ceiling up. You move Bagley to the 4. Bielitsa and those guys are still around for at least another year, along with Giles. And so you've got that 5-man group, right? You've got Hield, you've got Fox, you've got Harris, Bielitsa or Giles, and you got Bagley, and you've still got $30 million in space this next summer. That becomes a very intriguing Clippers-like scenario this year. You know what I mean? Like that becomes something, because like I said, I was just looking at it. You've got Shumpert coming off, you've got Randolph coming off, and then you give Tobias Harris the money. The big thing that could take up the money is Cauley Stein. So if you let him walk, you get that 5-man group, and then you go into 2020. Obviously, the big guy is Anthony Davis, but I don't want to talk about that. But if you go into 2020, you've got some interesting options there. Potentially Draymond. I mean, that's very, very far projecting. But that becomes a very similar situation in the Clippers right now, where you have intriguing young guys that are winning games, but you have the space to bring in the piece. So that would be, if I was them, and that's a great scenario where someone overpays Cauley Stein, Tobias Harris is interested for 20, 21, 22. You bring him in, fill that spot, Bagley goes to the 5, and you roll from there and look towards 2020.
That would be ideal. I like you. Let's hire you as the GM of the Kings. But going back to the Magic, you brought up a great point. Aaron Gordon is not a 3. No. My man is a 4. They have a guy who I really love in Jonathan Isaac. Who I think, I can't figure him out yet, but he is a 4, but he has that silkiness somewhere. 3 and 4 is so interchangeable nowadays, but don't you think that they have to move one of those 2 players because those guys can't play together?
The Magic haven't been able to score in like 4 years. I swear. Like they're play one of the ugliest games in basketball. Unfortunately, they can't score. They had Vogel as their coach from Indiana, and now they've got Steve Clifford. 2 very defensive minded guys. The Magic. This is what's crazy to me is you had Aaron Gordon, you had Jonathan Isaac. Those are 2 top 5 guys. And you go to the draft and you come out of the draft and DJ Augustine's still your starting point guard.
You're right.
They probably have the worst point guard group in the league. And I don't think it's all that close. I mean, the Suns are down there too. But getting back to your point, they're very similar, but I love Isaac's ability to guard multiple positions. He's going to work on his offensive game. Obviously, he's got to be able to shoot the ball, but I just don't know that you can let guys go like that are, 6'10", 6'11", long arms, have shown flashes of skill, could potentially even in some lineups play the 5 if you wanted them to. And so I think if you're going to move somebody that has maybe more legitimate value right now in terms of tangible on the basketball court value is probably Aaron Gordon. That's not to say he's been playing poorly this season. He's definitely continued to improve, but which I didn't think I would say this about Jonathan Isaac, to be honest, when he was drafted. But right now, I would probably pick him if you're putting me in a box and I have to pick one of those two guys.
You would trade Aaron Gordon before Isaac.
Correct. Yeah. Because I just think even if Mo Bamba never becomes the player that everybody wanted to say that he was going to be,
right?
That front court, assuming that they can become league average 3-point shooters, is incredibly versatile. I mean, they're super long. One is going to be able to defend the rim. The other is going to be able to guard any position that he wants on the floor. And they can continue to shoot the three, again, at a league average level, like Bamba hopefully will be able to, as well as Isaac. And that's your front court. And then at some point they can invest in guard so that Evan Fournier isn't leading them in scoring every year, hopefully.
Right.
At some point in the draft, they can invest.
So last question before we let you go, because I know you're on a busy schedule. Would you trade for Aaron Gordon or would you sign Tobias Harris, and why?
For the same money that Aaron Gordon's making?
Right. So which is like what, 20, 21?
Something around there. They're about the same value on an open market. They're about the same value player.
Right.
Depends on where I'm at, because Aaron Gordon is slightly younger. And Tobias Harris is slightly more polished offensively. So it depends on where I'm at. If you're just asking me to pick straight up, I would probably take Tobias Harris.
I would too.
But if I was a younger team that isn't necessarily trying to win immediately, for example, if I'm the Hawks and you're asking me to just straight up pick one and put them on my team, I would probably take Aaron Gordon. But just as a player, 1 versus 1, I would pick Tobias Harris.
Now, which player do you think fits more on this Kings team? Without, let's project without Willie.
Probably Tobias Harris still, because he's a better 3. Aaron Gordon, I mean, I guess Bielitsa's position doesn't really matter. He's going to stand out there and shoot. It doesn't really matter who he's out there with. You know what I mean? So that doesn't matter too much. But yeah, still probably Tobias Harris, because as we've learned already in Orlando, Aaron Gordon does not need to be a 3. It just doesn't need to happen. But still, falling under the dream scenario of Willie leaving and Tobias Harris coming, I would still pick Tobias Harris for this Kings team. And then, like I said, that's the best model that you can follow right now, is if you're a team like, Brooklyn or the Clippers or the Kings, if you want to be a free agent destination, which is the quickest turnaround you can possibly have, apart from these young guys that obviously are getting better, is you want to be an attractive free agent destination, and you can't just do it by tanking and being bad. You know what I mean? You can't be the Hawks and say, we've got one guy, you can fill the rest of them out. I don't think that's how it's going to work. Like, I just don't think that that's a realistic possibility. So in terms of being free agent players, that would be a great scenario. Like I said, is turning into the Clippers of Sacramento, as weird as that is to think about.
True. That is true. So final thoughts, Jimmy Butler debuts today. What do you expect? In
like 20 minutes, I guess. Right. Philly's super interesting, and they have been super interesting for the longest time, because when they started the process, like that's like what most, I don't know about most people, that's what I would always do on 2K, right? Like you just get rid of everybody and you draft all these young guys and then you pay in free agency, and that's what you do. But it's kind of like they did it backwards, right? Like the process was always supposed to be about, getting these young guys and being bad, but just accumulating assets more than anything. So you could jump on a trade like this when someone's being undervalued. For example, with Houston, they got James Harden because Thunder didn't want to pay the luxury tax, and they didn't realize how good or the rest of the league didn't realize how good he was. They did. They got him for what ended up being Steven Adams, basically. And so with the Sixers, though, it's almost like they should have signed someone this past summer and then traded for Jimmy. And Jimmy was supposed to be the final piece as opposed to the second to last. Right. So what you're running into now, and something I'm going to talk about a little bit on Friday, is if you trade Markelle Fultz and get rid of the salary, they will have within spitting distance of max salary cap space this summer, while also having Jimmy's cap hold so they can re-sign him to go over. They'll have about $30 million in space this summer because Simmons is still on his rookie deal. Embiid's a max guy, but it's a rookie max, so it's not as much. And Butler's cap hold would be about 30. So you want to keep that, sign a guy, re-sign Jimmy to go over, and then go from there. Now, you'd have to renounce rights to guys like JJ Redick, but that's the interesting thing to me about the Jimmy Butler situation is they are still moves to be made. This is not the final piece. If they want to try and find a fifth guy this year, they can, as long as two things happen. One, that guy doesn't affect their salary cap space, or two, it's someone like Bradley Beal that's the last one. Like you're using him.
That'd be crazy.
You know what I mean? Like you're using him as your potential free agent signing this summer. You're just using that space now as opposed to then, and you're giving up some number of assets, right? Because technically, let's just say the Kings finish 9th or 10th, right? In the lottery. Let's say that you go into the lottery and their pick is supposed to be 9th or 10th. By some miracle, Philly controls it if it's number 1. So if this is the way my mind works, let's just say for some reason the Sixers are able to get together some package of their future picks, Zaire Smith, Markelle Fultz for Bradley Beal. Let's just say that happens. They get Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, Simmons, Embiid. And then somehow you get in the offseason and the ping pong balls just roll their way and they get the first pick and it becomes theirs.
Zion.
Yeah, and then you get pick somebody from Duke. Close your eyes, pick somebody from Duke, and you're good. You know, because I think that's kind of the lost part of the whole Fultz Tatum thing is they didn't just give up the pick; they gave it up based on where it ends up. But so that's the thing for Philly is there are still moves to be made, whether it be this season, because they need a fifth guy. Like they have like four fifths of a really good starting lineup, right? Chandler is going to start tonight. Fultz is going to come off the bench, so it's going to be Redick, Simmons, Embiid, Butler, and Wilson Chandler, who's also part of the Melo deal twice.
That goes to the Sixers, and if it's not number 1, it goes to the Celtics.
So, yeah. So the way it worked was, if I'm remembering correctly, the Kings, in whatever summer they signed Rajon Rondo, sent that pick to Philly to get the space to get Rondo with like Nick Stauskas and something or another.
Yeah, they traded away Carl Landry and Jason Thompson's awful contracts, and then Sixers said, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah, so they got that. So the Sixers had control of the Kings pick, and then when they traded to get Fultz, which I've never really seen it like this. I'm used to like trade protections, but the way it worked out is they would have gotten the Celtics would have gotten the Lakers pick last year if it landed between 2 and 5, which it didn't. It landed at 10. Which was Mikal Bridges, which was Zaire Smith eventually, which, but so then when that didn't happen, it turned into the Kings pick this year is the Celtics unless it's number 1. And if it is number 1, then they get the Sixers regular pick. So it's probably another one of those trades that I'll end up doing a video on.
That's true.
The Rondo thing, which is crazy to think about and probably not something you want to talk about.
Right. So where can people follow you? I linked your YouTube channel. Tell them where they can follow you, brother.
Yeah. So Sporting Logically on YouTube. You can just search it, content every other day. It's always about the NBA. Again, big focus on off-season stuff, trade stuff, NBA history, all kinds of stuff. I just put out a video this morning, talking about just looking at the 2011 Carmelo Anthony trade and how it affects the league now. So where all those picks went to, like you said, Harry Giles was involved in that, super long term. And so that's what I just put out today. In terms of on Twitter, it's at Sporting Logical. No capitals, no underscores, none of that. Just at Sporting Logical on Twitter. Road to 400 followers on Twitter. I know you're way ahead of me there, but yeah, and we're on the grind to 40,000 subscribers on YouTube here pretty soon.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on and spending like 3 hours with me. I appreciate it. It's fun. You just have a conversation, you know what I mean? Like it's awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, guys. Again, don't forget to use the code COWBELL if you're going to a Sixers game, a Knicks game, any type of game event. Use the code COWBELL and get $20 off your purchase. That's going to do it, y'all. On behalf of the entire CK team, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys on the next video.